Okay, so now we are going to look at another inheritance pattern known as sex-linked recessive. So how you would look at a pedigree and determine that that is the mode of inheritance. So now we're going to watch part 2 of that Amoeba Sisters clip and then come back together and do some practice problems.
Deal about how this was an autosomal pedigree. Well, what if you're dealing with a sex-linked trait and therefore a sex-linked pedigree? There are a lot of sex-linked recessive traits. Color blindness and some male patterns of baldness can be sex-linked. Let's pretend now that we're told this is a sex-linked recessive trait. I'm going to keep the old labeled pedigree here that showed an autosomal recessive trait just for comparison, but now here's a brand new sex-linked pedigree. First of all the females, the circles, should have an XX to indicate 2 X sex chromosomes by them. Remember, females have 2 X chromosomes. Males should have an XY to indicate an X and a Y sex chromosome. That's always a good thing to do first. Now remember that we were told this pedigree is tracking sex-linked recessive traits. So the shaded one here has the sex-linked recessive trait. A reminder from our sex-linked video about how this works. Let's use the letter R for an allele. Now recall that females that do not have the trait, they can be either this or this. And the heterozygote genotype, this, is a carrier. She doesn't have the trait herself because of the dominant allele, but she's carrying it. Only a female that is this will have the sex-linked recessive trait. So if I'm looking at this pedigree, what would the genotype for individual 1 in generation 1 be? Well, notice here she has 3 children, and one of her sons here is shaded. Where does her son get his Y sex chromosome from? The father. Where does he get his X sex chromosome from? His mother. Individual 1 doesn't have the trait, or she would be shaded, but she must be a carrier if her son received an X chromosome with a recessive allele on it. Now, what about individual 2 in generation 2? Well, she can be this, like her mother, but look, she could also be this because it's possible to get one of those from each parent. If it's possible, you must include it. Now, pause the video and try the last female. How'd you do? Remember, the key here is to always check and make sure that when you look at a child, they have to be able to get one of their alleles from each parent. Now remember that both of these examples were recessive. It doesn't have to be that way. On our handout, you can try one that follows an autosomal dominant trait. If it's a dominant allele that you're tracking, remember it would only take one dominant allele for a person to have that trait. Another quick thing to point out is sometimes you will see pedigrees that are have shaded. Well, that's just awesome because they're basically letting you know that the have shaded ones are carriers. If I wanted to turn our first one into that have shading, then it would look like this. Mapping and understanding pedigrees is important, especially as we continue to make advancements in understanding how genetic disorders are inherited. Well, that's it for the Amoeba Sisters, and we remind you to stay curious.
Okay, so now that we watched the Amoeba Sisters review of sex-linked traits, now we are going to focus on how to, so remember, they can be sex-linked dominant as well, but this little segment will be on sex-linked recessive. So the conclusions that you made for autosomal traits apply to sex-linked traits. In this exercise, we will work on some additional conclusions because males only have 1 X chromosome and females have 2. So we will determine if pedigrees can be for a trait that is X-linked recessive. Use the following designations. So a big A for normal, a little a for having the genetic disease or disorder or the abnormality. And remember, for sex-linked, it's very important to use the sex chromosomes. So first you would, any females, you would do XX. Any males, you would do XY, right, to designate them as such. Now, mom has it, so she would have the little a. She would have to be homozygous recessive for it. That's the only way she would have it. Dad does not, so he would have the dominant allele, the big A, and the son does not. So in this case, is this pedigree a possible pedigree for an X-linked recessive trait? No, it is not. Because mom could only, dad's going to give his son a Y. Now mom only has a little a to give. So she is going, her son, if mom is affected, her son is going to be affected as well. Okay, what about this one? So again, mom, dad, son. Mom has it. Dad does not. Son does. So in this case, like I just said, if mom's affected, her son is going to be as well. Because dad gives his son the Y, making him a boy, right? Whereas mom would give, mom's affected, so mom only has a little a to give, so she would give her son this allele. So this would be a possible scenario. All right, what about this one? Okay, so dad does not have it, mom has it, right? So is it a possible that this is X-linked? So dad would have given his daughter the X to make her a girl, right? And mom only has a little a to give, so this one is possible. Remember, in pedigrees, they don't always designate carriers. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. Because remember, their really job is just to shade in the individuals affected by the trait. So in this case, the daughter would be a carrier, but she would not have the trait or display the trait. But this mode of inheritance, this could fit an X-linked recessive trait inheritance pattern. Okay, so what about this one? So in this case, mom has it again. Dad does not. Daughter does. So is that possible? No, because dad could only give his daughter that, so this one's not possible. So remember, mothers affected with X-linked recessive characteristics. So if a mom is affected with an X-linked recessive trait, or dominant for that matter, then her son will have it. Okay, so if mom's affected, her son is going to have it, like we saw in this inheritance pattern here, because dad gives the son a Y. Now, if mom has it, but dad does not, then the daughter won't have it. Okay, so if mom has it, and dad does not, then daughter won't have the trait. Because again, dad gives his daughter the X. So in this case, the daughter, this cannot be possible. Okay, the daughter won't have it if dad does not. So what can you conclude about the father of an affected female? Like I just said, he doesn't have the genetic disorder or the trait for it. And we're going to use these same designations with X big A, meaning that you do not have the genetic disorder, because we're focusing on X-linked recessive genetic disorders. So X little a signifies that you do have the allele for that disorder. Okay, so let's look at this one. So here's mom. Mom is not affected. Here's dad. Dad is affected, little a. Son is affected. So is it possible is this one possible? So dad would give his son that. So that means mom would have to be a carrier. But yes, that is possible. Remember, I said carriers aren't always shown. Okay, so half of the circle would be shaded in, but that's not always the case. So where did the son get the X little a gene from? Mom. And what can you conclude about father to son transmission of X-linked traits? It can't happen. Okay. Fathers only give their sons a Y chromosome. So therefore, X-linked trait transmission does not happen. Okay, last one here. So mom has it, dad has it, their daughter does not possible, right? Because dad would give daughter that. So not possible. What can you conclude if both parents are affected with an X-linked recessive trait? If both parents are affected, then their children are all going to have it, because dad would give the little daughter that and mom would as well. Whereas if they had a son, mom would give this and dad would give the Y. So if both parents are affected with a X-linked recessive trait, then all of their kids would have it. How does this compare to parents being affected by an autosomal recessive trait? Well, let's see. So if they're affected, they're going to be shaded in. Autosomal, we just use A's, but we don't have to, it's not sex transmitted, so you don't have to use the sex chromosomes. So if they had a daughter, daughter would have to get it. If they had a son, son would have to get it, right? So it is the same deal. Do the conclusions? Yes. Okay. So a big way to see that it is a recessive inheritance pattern would be if both parents have it and all the kids have it. Then you have to look a little bit further to determine if it's autosomal or sex-linked. So here's a good way on how to do that. So mom has it, dad does not. They have 4 kids together. Okay, their daughter does not have it, so dad would have given her this, mom would have given her this, so she's a carrier. Their son does have it, right? Remember, if mom's affected, her sons are going to be affected because all she can give is the allele for it. Same deal, this daughter would be a carrier. Got the big A from dad, the little A from mom. Now, this, let's start over here. So this daughter marries a man who doesn't have it. So men either have it or they don't. So he would be that genotype. Now they have a son with it. So the son would have received that allele from mom and this from dad. Now this son doesn't have it. So that son would have received this allele from mom and this from dad. Now both of these daughters don't have it. So they would have gotten the X big A from dad, and then they could have gotten either one from mom. So they potentially could be carriers. Okay, they potentially could be carriers. Now over here, this son marries a daughter with it. So she would have to be that. And again, if both parents have it, all of the kids are going to have it. Because mom can only give that, the dad gives that to make that a baby boy, and dad can only give that, and same with mom. So what you would do first, again, is look if both parents have it and all the kids have it, then you think recessive. And then you have to figure out if it's sex-linked or autosomal. So the big hint that it's sex-linked would be the fact that more men generally will display the trait than females, where you can see in this pedigree, right? So remember, we have 3 generations mapped out here, and over those 3 generations, 5 men have it compared to 3 females. So that's the big hint that then it is sex-linked.